Hi, I'm Mike Bush.
I'm Paul New.
And I'm Colleen Sterling. Welcome to Ask the A&Ps from AOPA.
On Ask the A&Ps, we take your toughest maintenance questions, and occasionally we actually come up with good answers. So if you have a question, um, email us at podcasts@aopa.org for a chance to get on the show.
Please follow or subscribe to be alerted when a new show comes out so you don't miss an episode of all those almost right answers.
And if you'd like to get on our email list, easiest way is to text the word savvy, SAVVY, to 33777. And a bot will ask you for your email address and your name and put you on our mailing list for our newsletter and other good stuff. We've been sending out a lot of good stuff lately. Mm-hmm. So again, text the word savvy, SAVVY, to 33777 to put yourself on our list.
So what is some of this all cool stuff that we've been sending out lately?
Yeah. Any Christmas presents in there?
Yeah. Like valves or something, maybe.
I wanted a valve for Christmas. I didn't get it, though.
Well, we did a lot of stuff on the 1st of January. We launched a whole new website for the company. It looks a lot more professional than the old one, and
with updated pictures, so you can see what we look like. Really,
yeah. And
does anybody really want to see those pictures?
It was amazing because we put together the team photos and bios, and there were 43 people. I didn't know I had that many people working for.
Don't you pay attention to payroll?
That was a shock.
Great crew too. It's really
fun. Yeah,
to
really,
see everybody
it's really an amazing team that we built. But we also officially launched our borescope initiative, and released a video, a training course. It's about a 35-minute video training course for A&Ps and for maintenance involved owners who would want to learn how to do a proper borescope inspection. We created a very specific protocol for exactly what images to take in what order, and we launched a borescope image repository on our platform, which is available free to anybody who wants to use it, for uploading images and archiving them and making it easy to compare, current images with the previous inspections and so on. We released a checklist for mechanics and owners who are doing borescope inspections to remind them what photos to take of each cylinder in what order and so on, and how to name the files if they want to bulk upload them to the borescope repository, the image repository. So lots of stuff.
I watched the preview of the video. Dave Pasquale does a wonderful job. He's got a great camera too. It's really sharp, and he's in his hangar and showing you how he's using the borescope, and he's got the big screen computer right there, so you can see the images that he's recording with the borescope, and you can see the snaps that he's getting. And I just watched 10 minutes. It's a 35-minute video, and I learned several things, and I've been using a borescope for over 10 years, so it's really well done.
Yeah, Dave has done some just absolutely remarkable work, innovative work, and that we're trying to spread the gospel of Dave, both in the area of borescopy, where he's really reduced it to a science, I think, and also he was did a lot of pioneering work on lapping valves in place. Mm-hmm. So Dave is an amazing guy, and we're very privileged to have him as part of the Savvy team.
Yeah.
I'm just now looking at the new website. First time, mm-hmm. Typical me, don't ever prepare. And Yeah, this is the first time I've actually seen some of these people's faces.
Yeah,
It's-
I agree.
And some
Yeah.
of us look a lot older than the last time I've seen some.
Yeah.
Yeah, we one of the big challenges in getting this website together was to get 43 people to give
Send
us
pictures.
headshots for the for the About Us page, and
Yeah.
we had one of our account managers who I will leave, who will remain nameless,
I can't imagine who.
who he's, I don't know, he's probably close to 60, and he sent us his graduation photo from Embry Riddle, when he was about 5.
That's great.
We
I
said,
got
no, that's
rejected.
not going to work.
Oh.
Everybody wants to send us photos of when they were 20 or 30 years younger.
Well, I think I've been at Savvy since 2011 or 13, something like that. And we
Yeah, but
went
you never
to
changed.
Pretty much.
we went to Vegas and we had
Yep.
a corporate meeting and everybody came. And I remember we sat around one table. There were about 12 people there, and I
Yep.
thought it was awesome. And now, I look at and our newest member is Logan from Sioux Falls.
Uh-huh.
It was great to see him. He looked thrilled in the picture to be part of the Savvy team. So it's
He's
been really,
one of our younger people.
yeah, no, it's great. It's really exciting to see the team grow like that.
Yeah.
I remember when Steve
amazing.
Vandervault came on the team.
Mhm.
Of course, I was back in 2008. And just before that, Cessna had just bought Columbia. And so I went to the Columbia week-long maintenance school up in Bend, Oregon.
Mhm.
And when Steve came on to the team, it's been a couple of years, and he sent me a picture of the class picture that we took in Bend, Oregon. And he and I are in the same picture, but we had no clue.
Yeah,
And it was, we definitely looked younger in that photo.
that's great. Yeah.
So we didn't
And-
even know we knew each other.
And I think it's very cool that we have a couple women on the team too. Very
Oh,
accomplished women.
couple.
so,
There's more than a couple, isn't there?
yeah. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
often you run into a female A&P there. I mean, I teach and they're probably one in my class
Yeah.
of 25 each term. So
Definitely an anomaly.
yeah. So
Yeah.
great team, Mike. Good job putting everybody together and building it up and inspiring us all. Our first question is from Maciej, who is challenging conventional wisdom. Go ahead, Maciej.
Hello, everyone. Big fan. Thank you for everything you do to make me even more fun at parties. And
oh, we got to add that to the list.
I'm a fairly new private pilot, and there are some things that I've been taught but never really given like a satisfying explanation for. One of those things is sumping the fuel, and specifically, you sump the fuel, you check it for impurities and water, and if you're satisfied the fuel is okay, then you're supposed to dispose it at the designated disposal area and not put it back in the tank, unless you have one of the magic screen samplers that Sporty will sell you for $20. The logic that I don't really see is if I just inspected the fuel and determined that it's good enough for me to fly with it, why is it bad to put it back in the tank?
I've been putting it back in the
Yeah.
tank for 55
Well,
years.
Yeah.
He's saying without filtering it though. Just
I-
pouring
I-
it.
I don't feel
You've been
Doesn't
doing
make
that?
any difference.
Yeah.
You drain it, you look at it. If it looks okay, you pour it back in. If
it was in there before. If it
if
wasn't
it's
a
got
problem in there before,
particulate
it's
matter
okay
or
now.
water in it, then you probably don't want to
Dump
pour
it.
it back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
All right, so that
interesting.
is in fact what I've been thinking and decided to start doing, simply because like I could not see a reason not to. And the other question is the favorite of constant speed propellers
Mhm.
and operating oversquare or high manifold pressure and low RPM. I know all the things about the engine. This is bad for the engine. I've seen all of Mike's seminars on that. However, one of the ground schools I've seen mentions the stress on the propeller rather than the engine. It says that at very low RPM and high power settings, this is stressful for the propeller and can overstress it. And I'm not sure that I buy it, because if you think about it, if you have a cruise prop installed and takeoff, well, that's exactly what you're doing. This is low RPM, high power application. On the other hand, a fixed pitch cruise propeller is a solid chunk of metal, whereas a constant speed propeller is really a complicated mechanism with hub and everything, things that could conceivably be overstressed. So I would really like to ask, what can happen? Is there anything that actually can be overstressed? And if so, what would be overstressed if
Maciej,
I operate it?
I need to back you up for a minute, because I
Sure.
thought I heard you say that you heard me say in a webinar or something about the evils of running over square.
Oh
'Cause
no,
that's the
sorry.
exact opposite.
No, yeah,
of
it's
what-
I mean
No,
the
yeah.
exact opposite. That
Yeah,
that it's not bad for
okay,
the
Mike.
engine, and
We
that's
got you
the
right.
it's old wives' tales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the you know, there's nothing magic about square, and
Right.
you know, the if
Let's
you
use
if you
millibars.
change all the units to metric or something, all of
Right.
that goes away.
Goes
So
away.
What's our rule of thumb? Gee.
but you know, the way I like to think about it is I think of the prop control kind of as a gear shift
Right.
in a car. And you know, if you're driving a car up the hill and you stay in high gear, eventually, you know, the engine is going to start complaining, and it's
Mhm.
going to want you to shift to a lower gear.
Right.
And it's kind of the same thing with the constant speed prop. You know, you want to reduce the RPM for cruise, but if you do it for climb, it's going to be kind of tough on the engine.
Right.
Just like driving up a hill in fourth gear in
And-
a sports car or something.
And for that matter, would it be possible to stall the engine at super low RPM, or does the
No, I
government
don't.
really...
I don't think so.
As long as you don't
um,
feather it.
But you know, if you get the operator's manual for your engine, usually this stuff is not in POHs, unfortunately.
Right.
But if you get the operator's manual for your engine from Continental or Lycoming, as opposed to from Cessna or Piper, it'll typically have a chart in it that shows you the acceptable operating envelope in terms of what combinations of manifold pressure and RPM are acceptable. And,
right.
And you know, typically for
I
most Continental engines, that envelope will extend several inches over square. And for Lycoming engines, typically it's even more than that. It can be 5 or 6 inches over square.
What about the propeller? Because that's the thing that gave me pause in that one ground school that I was watching.
Here's my question: is I'm having difficulty seeing how there's any difference other than your the power pulses. Of course, they're directly proportional to RPM. I could see something. I could make something up there, but I would really want to ask the school. They're the ones that are saying there's a problem and it overstresses. What exactly does it overstress? Because I've never heard this. I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
I know several propeller shop owners, and I've never heard anybody say that their propellers are coming in all beaten up because people are operating.
I don't see how the propeller could know the difference. Now,
there
often are in some installations, there are RPM ranges that the propeller shouldn't be operated in because of resonance problems,
vibration.
Right.
But those are invariant as to whether the deck angle of the airplane is nose up or nose down. It's just they're just RPM ranges that should be you should try to stay out of.
I happen to know somebody whose propeller came off an airplane because of power pulses. That would be my husband. And I will say the propeller itself did not fail. The flange failed. So the propeller,
crankshaft,
the actual crankshaft flange failed.
In fairness to everything related to that, he was just a little bit outside of the normal envelope.
Yeah, but the point is, when you really abuse it, what's the first thing that failed? It was the flange and the bolts that held the crankshaft to the prop,
wasn't.
not the
It
internal.
wasn't really the flange, was it?
The bolts got ripped out of the flange,
Yeah.
or sheared. Yeah.
Just
Yeah,
the bolts.
you'd expect the bolts to be the things that go.
Yeah.
The bolts
Well,
that secured the propeller to the
yeah,
crankshaft.
but the crankshaft was ruined too. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Well,
So
it
now
was,
But the
in
prop was
other
okay.
but it was ruined as a secondary effect because the bolts were all wiggling around. It was,
yeah.
Yeah.
the bolts are the things that typically fail.
so to summarize, there isn't really anything special about constant speed props that would make them more fragile
I
than
don't think so.
fixed pitch
No.
props.
They're going to go a lot sooner from corrosion than they are from
Yes.
abuse, I think.
Yeah. And
All right.
Mike follows accident data for like, the past
Forever.
eon since he was born, I
Right.
think. And there aren't any general aviation piston engine propeller failures.
Oh, there have been a few
And-
accidents where the propeller departed the aircraft, like
But it
Dave's.
wasn't the propeller failing.
Yeah, like
But it wasn't
Dave's,
the
yeah.
propeller's fault. It,
Yeah.
Right.
it was the
Or a nick in
attachment.
the propeller. We've recovered some airplanes in the past where
Oh, you
a nick in the propeller would cause a crack and a
Yeah.
chunk of it would separate,
And
Yeah.
but
vibration,
never
yeah.
because the propeller was over stressed per
Not
se.
where it
Yeah,
joins
years
Normal
ago,
operation.
years ago, I got to see a video that was a stop action video of a propeller being run up in a test cell at various
Mhm.
RPMs,
Yeah.
and it was a very profound experience because the blades bend to a degree that you couldn't even imagine, and at some
They're scary.
RPMs that they're like standing waves on the blades and stuff. And when you see how much the blades flex, you never look at a nick the same way again.
Yeah, right. Get that taken care of right away.
All right. I think that really confirms what I suspected, that there shouldn't be anything magical about constant speed props being more prone, but I wanted to confirm. And I've been operating with the general idea, if I'm in cruise, low RPM is better for everyone.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yep.
You know,
You're doing well.
it's often makes a lot of sense to do what I think you're doing, which is to
Question.
filter the stuff you were
Mhm.
told with a healthy dose of common sense.
In
And
all walks of life, not just
I
aviation.
I think it's true in all branches of
Yes.
aviation, since I started skydiving before I started flying powered planes, and the same kind of like my instructor told my instructor, and we've been trying to figure out why they said that for 50 years, and nobody
Right.
quite knows, but you're gonna die if you do this.
Yeah.
Good. It's good to question.
Good
authority.
job.
well, we've all had to unlearn a lot of the stuff that our instructors taught us.
Well,
Thank
great
you.
question.
Thank
Great
you.
question, Maciej, and thank you so much for dialing in. It's nice to meet you.
Absolutely, it's my
Yeah.
my pleasure. Take care.
We'll see ya.
Our next question is from George, who is digging deep on lapping valves. Go ahead, George.
All right, and thank you for having me on. Yeah, I have a plane that has some valve issues. I've got 6 cylinders, an 0470R. One of the cylinders is fine. The other 5 all have varying levels of green on them.
Mm.
And I was told that 4 of those cylinders could probably be lapped in place, but the 5th one was going to need to be pulled. And so my question is, I'm probably going to try lapping all 5 of them and just see what happens. But I'm trying to determine what the risk is of flying with a valve that has at one time been green. I've read articles that say they sometimes revert back, and others that green means stop. And so I'm just trying to get a feel for the actual risk involved of breakage of a valve once it's turned green, and if anybody knows what exactly is happening with the metallurgy when a valve turns green. That's kind of my basic
You know, this
focus
whole
question.
green thing has become the source of massive confusion since my good buddy Adrian Eichhorn introduced his green means stop notion. Because there's two different kinds of green. There are green deposits, which are perfectly normal and perfectly okay. And there's where the metal itself is turning green. And the only way you ever would see the metal itself turning green is if the valve got so hot that all the deposits have been burned off and you're looking at just bare valve metal. And if the metal itself is turning green, that seems to be indicative of the fact that the alloy is
too hot.
is changing. But I am not sufficiently knowledgeable of metallurgy to tell you exactly where the green is coming from. I suspect it's some sort of copper coming out of the.
Couldn't find it on the
I just don't know. But most of the green you see is actually green deposits, which is perfectly normal, doesn't mean anything. A lot of this stuff came back from the day when the early days of bore scoping cylinders, when we didn't have bore scopes with articulating tips, and really all we could do is look at the face of the valve and go by the colors on the face of the valve and see if they were symmetrical or asymmetrical. And nowadays, where we can actually get the camera positioned between the valve and the seat and really look at the sealing surfaces of the valve and the seat, we don't have to rely quite as much on what the color pattern is. We can actually take a look at the sealing surfaces and see whether there's significant metal erosion or not. And as long as there's not a lot of metal erosion, the valve is a reasonable candidate for lapping. And my theory is that unless the valve is an obvious train wreck, it always makes sense to try lapping it. I learned the hard way when I started lapping valves myself that usually when the first time you do valve lapping, you don't do it aggressively enough. You have to do it quite aggressively. You have to do multiple cycles.
You're not going to hurt it. Don't be shy.
And keep doing it until you get a nice, clean contact line on the valve sealing surface all the way around the circumference. But if you lap the valve sufficiently aggressively to reestablish a good contact surface, then typically whatever color anomaly you saw on the face of the valve will resolve in 15 or 25 hours of operation.
So the metal actually changes color if it's running cooler, Mike? Is that what you're saying?
No, it seems to run. It seems to change color if it's running extremely hot.
Yeah. So what I'm saying though is, so it ran hot, you got a green asymmetric valve face, you do the lapping, and then you run it and put it back in service, and you're saying the green will go away?
Well, again, it depends on what kind of green it is, Colleen.
Well, the metal green as opposed to the deposits green.
If the valve has gotten so badly burned that you're looking at bare metal and it's turning green, then it's likely not a viable candidate for lapping.
Okay.
You don't want to go strictly on the color. You want to
look at
take a look at the sealing surface. And one of the nice things about lapping is when you remove the rocker and the valve springs and can manipulate the valve, now you can spin it all the way around, look at every bit of it with a bore scope. When you're looking at it during a normal bore scope inspection, you can only see like half of it.
Yeah.
But once you've taken the valve springs off and you can spin the valve around, you get to see everything. Yeah. And as long as you're not seeing, either major metal erosion or major warping of the valve, it's probably a good candidate to be lapped.
So far, all the ones that we've lapped, which are quite a few, have been successful, but we have never lapped any when the metal has turned green.
Okay.
I don't even bother, because we know that metal, according to Adrian's chart, has gotten to 1650 degrees, and I think it's probably not savable, so I don't bother even trying. But what we do is bore scope at every opportunity, certainly at every annual, and you normally can catch these before they ever turn green. It doesn't
Yeah.
take much effort to prevent the issue instead of
Exactly.
trying to save the issue.
Mhm.
Yeah, we unfortunately, most of the shops that I've dealt with, unless we try to pound into their head otherwise, will typically not even look at the cylinder with a bore scope unless the compression is low, which
Or
is
the
really
Mhm.
bass
client
backwards.
asks.
Right.
Yeah.
We want to look at every cylinder every time, and basically anytime a top spark plug is out, it's almost criminal not to stick a bore scope in the hole and take a look.
Now that
It takes
does
hardly any time to
that
do it.
does go against your recommendation that unless it's an annual inspection, you don't like fishing expeditions on your plane. But this is different because
No,
this
this
is
is different
preventative
because
maintenance.
because the earlier we can catch
Right.
a valve,
Mhm.
and very frequently what happens is the rotator stops rotating,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and then the valve starts developing an asymmetrical signature. And if we can catch that early, then lapping is always going to be effective.
It's going to save you a lot of
It's
money.
only if it goes long enough that the valve starts to get into significant metallurgical distress,
Mhm.
that will wind up having to pull a cylinder. So
And pulling spark plugs is like almost one of the
Yes.
least invasive things you can possibly do.
Right.
I'm more concerned about people changing oil than I am changing spark plugs. If you do something wrong with the spark plugs,
It'll
the
run
engine may
bad.
run rough and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't
you
run out
forget
of
to-
oil.
Yeah, it doesn't
So
run out of oil.
it's still running.
Yeah.
When you're doing the aggressive valve lapping, do you have to worry about? I heard this on one of your podcasts, something about valve seat recession. Are you likely to grind enough out that would make a difference?
Oh, that'd
No.
be really tough.
no,
With valve grinding
the
compound,
amount of metal that you're taking away is minute.
Mhm.
you're
Okay.
mostly taking deposits off of the valve.
Yeah.
Or off of the seat.
Not metal,
When,
but
yeah,
deposits,
when
yeah.
we see, sometimes we'll see, we call it a waterfall effect on the seat, where it's been leaking in one spot for a while, and that
Mhm.
actually erodes the seat.
Hmm.
When we see that, it's not likely that we can get that out with valve grinding compound. We work and work and work, and it just doesn't go away, and you're not going to fix that.
Hmm.
But short of that, almost everything you're just cleaning it up. There's very little actually cutting going on.
Oh, okay.
But it's almost always worth a try.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's fun to do.
We always want to, pull cylinders as a last resort, and we want to try our best to rescue the cylinder without having to pull it off.
Well, I appreciate all that good advice because the engine does run great, and I'd like to save it. I listened to a bunch of your podcasts driving down here to Florida, and I learned a lot. I'm getting ready to build my own air cam, and I learned I might be able
Wow.
to log the hours and become an A&P. So we'll
Yeah.
see how
Go.
that goes.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Jumping over
Very
to the
cool.
dark side. Go for it.
Go tax.
We're rooting
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
All
Glad
right,
you came back,
George.
George. All right. Thanks for the question. Bye-bye.
All right, it's time for some letters. I had a couple of good ones this month. Paul, I'm going to give you a chance, first of all, to clarify something that I think I know what you meant, but just in case for anybody
Gosh.
else. Are you
Letter
ready?
to the editor. That guy
Yep.
said something stupid. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So this is from Andy. He says, in the most recent episode of Ask the A&Ps, I was confused by something Paul said at the very end.
Well,
It was
that's
something.
normal.
He
It
said
was
bye.
something to the effect of, quote, If you're really close to the ground, you won't have the engine leaned. Then he said, which I don't remember you saying, but I'll take his word for it.
Close to the ground.
If
He
you're
says,
low
I'm very
altitude.
often leaned when close to the ground. One circumstance is in which this occurs is on takeoff and landing at fields over 5,000. Okay. The other is anytime I'm at, quote, cruise power, which is at or below 75% with a Lycoming or 65% with a Continental. This can occur in any altitude if the power is pulled back sufficiently. I spent a lot of time cruising close to the ground, say 50 to 200 feet AGL, and below
Oh, that's-
2,000 MSL. I hope he's a seaplane pilot.
Yeah, right. Or
Pipeline patrol.
a pipeline.
Yeah,
patrol,
pipeline patrol. Yeah. My usual setting is 22 inches, 2,200 RPM, so squared. Since I'm operating at less than 75% power, I'm leaned. What am I missing?
I think the context was not that. I don't remember the context at
You're
all.
probably
but
talking about rich takeoff, full rich.
yeah, maybe full rich
sea
for
level, but
takeoff.
I don't know.
Typical.
I don't remember.
I live at 411 feet. So, it's always full rich for takeoff. But absolutely, if you're at high altitude, if you're in Denver or Front Range, somewhere like that, you're gonna have to lean for takeoff, and
Unless you're turbocharged.
unless you're
In which
turbocharged.
case you
Yeah,
don't.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, you always have to quantify or qualify some of the things that are said.
Yeah.
And if you're cruising at any altitude, now Continental, way back in the day, said no leaning below 5,000 feet.
Yeah. That's common in
Then-
a lot of like 70 eras airplanes in the POH.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they upgraded that to no leaning below 3,000 feet instead of just saying no leaning below or above a certain power setting, which would have been a way better
Yeah.
way to put it. But people weren't. Anyway, I think they were just trying to simplify life. So I would say I probably intended if you're at power, at full power, something like that, you wouldn't want to be lean. And most people will not lean at takeoff, and most people will go to full rich just before landing. I don't do that, but
I don't do that.
but there are a lot of people that they're concerned about the go around and missing the mixture knob, and that's perfectly fine.
Now,
if
most
you're
of them do it because that's what the POH says to do, and that's
Exactly,
because POH
yeah.
was written by a lawyer and not by an aeronautical engineer.
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know the context of what I said, but he's absolutely right. In all those situations, you definitely want to lean the engine.
Yeah,
Okay.
Paul, you got to be really careful about what you say because
Man.
somebody's going to call you on it.
They
I
are
know.
listening
Close.
out there, Paul.
Yeah.
But just think, if all three listeners out there didn't listen that close, we wouldn't have cool letters to read.
Right.
Oh, geez.
Well, there's proof we have more than three because they're different, unless they're writing in from, their friends' emails or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pretty devious.
All right. So this one, this is a good one. He says, I just listened to the November 1st podcast. Sorry, Paul. Paul New said that the valves can stick open, closed, or anywhere in between. If that's true, what Paul said is that what Paul didn't say, is that you'll get a bent push rod on everything other than a wide open valve. Think about it. If a valve is jammed shut and the cam via the push rod says open, something bad is going to happen. Something like this.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
That's pretty normal. That's not the only failure, though. I've had
Wow.
one that I show in my engine monitor class where it was a Lycoming engine. The valve stuck not fully closed. It was probably a quarter of the way open. And it busted it was on a Lycoming, and it busted the ears off the casting for the cylinder
On
Oh.
that hold the
cover?
rocker
Mhm.
shaft.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And the push rod was perfectly straight.
Oh,
but
interesting.
A bent push rod is the more common failure mode.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, he here it is.
Oh, there
on
you
the
go.
engine.
That's
Oh,
exactly
yeah.
what it looks like.
Nice. Wow.
Yep. So this is Steven, by the way, and so he sent
Easy
a number.
troubleshooting there.
Yeah.
Look at the
So-
oil at the engine block.
Yeah, a number of photos there. It is off.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
And,
really interesting to see.
Yeah, and you can see in this one the imprint.
The valve
Is there-
strike.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I can see the nice round
Yep.
Yeah.
circle in the
Perfect bullseye
11
there, yeah.
o'clock
Yeah.
position.
On
Yeah.
on the engine that we had happen. This
That's
is
a parallel
number of years
valve
ago.
engine. It's not a smile. It's
Right.
A,
Yeah, it's a
full
parallel
phase.
valve.
Interesting.
on-
So
on
they're square
ours-
to the piston. Yep.
They are. Yeah.
Mhm.
On mine, there was no valve strike.
So the push
it
rod.
wasn't
Okay.
stuck open enough to. to get
Right.
it on
Wow.
strike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
the
this
problem,
Yeah, I was going to say, Mike, I know you said it's embarrassing to run out of oil before fuel, and it almost happened to him. He did make it though. Yeah,
Wow.
that's an
Yeah.
R182.
Look at it all over the tire.
yeah, yeah. He said some interesting things from the event. The engine ran surprisingly well on 5 cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a lot of vibration.
Yep.
There was a distinct lack of power, he said.
Hmm.
Obviously.
So on
Yeah.
the plane that we had, a customer is 2,400 hours or so, and they had several events where the valve had stuck over the last 6 months, but assumed it was a bad EGT indication. They
Oh.
never checked the CHT and never called their mechanic to ask what the problem was. Just figured, well, we'll take care of it at annual.
Hmm.
And then this cylinder came apart, and we looked at the data. It was a G1000 equipped airplane, and we could see it came apart on the takeoff roll, and they
Wow.
flew 3 hours
Holy cow.
Oh my gosh.
and said the engine, it was less power, the slower climb. They weren't going as fast, but didn't really notice any vibration.
Wow. Hey,
And they're
guys,
flying on 3 cylinders.
the plane
5
is
cylinders.
talking to you. Listen to it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's the whole point of
Yeah.
that's why I put it in my presentation. It's like you got to be paying attention.
Hmm.
Well, it is worth noting that 6-cylinder engines do a lot better on 5 cylinders than 4-cylinder engines
That's
do on 3
Yes.
cylinders. So
That's
Yes.
simple math. Let's
Yeah.
think about that.
And especially these engines these are 540 cubic inch engines, only putting out 230 or 235
yeah,
horsepower.
they're derated.
They are so derated. I mean,
Mhm.
the same size, not the same engine, but the same size engine can put out easily 350 horsepower.
Right.
Um,
You're talking about the R182.
The R182 and the
Yeah.
Restart 182s both use a
Yeah.
parallel valve 540.
Right,
Different
which
versions
is
of it.
actually a 260 horsepower engine.
260 normally, both of them derated, one to 230 and the other one to 235.
Yeah. So those
Great
those
engine.
are like fabulous candidates for TBO busting because they're just
That's-
loafing along.
That's right.
Mhm.
But you do have to pay attention to valve sticking.
Yeah.
Is the Lycomings.
Yep.
And that's true in
Yeah.
all Lycomings.
Yep.
And
So
the
it
hope
happens-
is that a lot of that'll go away when
With
we start
unleaded
using
gas.
unleaded avgas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And synthetic oils.
Mhm.
If they ever bring back synthetic oils.
Yeah.
Our next question is from Doug, who is trying to spread the leaning gospel. Go ahead, Doug.
Yes.
Well,
That was a
thank you.
joke,
and
Doug.
Happy New Year from Idaho. I'm a CFI out here at Idaho. I actually been following Mike Bush for about 20 years. I was with the Cessna Pilots Association and used to read his articles. And that's what got me started on getting an engine analyzer in my 182. I had a
Oh, good
P
for you.
model for 20 years and just sold it. It's out in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania now. But anyway, I'm flying, actually giving instrument instruction to a pilot, and we are on an IFR flight plan in a 182 that's owned by the flight service. Used to be a flight school out of Buell, Idaho, small airport here in Idaho. And as we were on top, I just didn't like the way that the engine was sounding, and he was adamant about running the engine 100 degrees rich of peak, and he said that's where the owner of the airplane is a flight instructor, and he's also an IA, and he wanted him flying it at 100 degrees rich peak. And we're up about 11,000 feet, and I said, this engine just is not running very well. And so I says, I think you need to lean it up a little bit. And we leaned it a little bit, and it started running better. And we had a discussion after we got done with that flight. And he said, you need to go on and look at Mike Bush's webinars about staying out of the red box. And I kind of knew what the red box was. But fast forward to recently, I'm almost getting the impression from your guys' show here that the red box maybe isn't as important at altitude as what these guys are thinking it is, because granted, the 0470 carbureted 0470s are very poor fuel distributions, which I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, but I have tried to fly my 182 Lena Peak with my engine analyzer, and I've had mixed luck with it. But I kind of like the advice that I saw on your show a while back about saying, you know what, lean that thing up and then bring it in till it just starts to smooth and leave it there, especially above 8,000 feet. And that's what I told him. And we started flying it that way at altitude. And the airplane was real happy. His fuel consumption went down, and his cylinder head temperatures were a little cooler, and went that route. So my question to you guys is, now that you've got a lot of these newer pilots with the webinars and concerned about staying out of the red box, especially in a 182 carbureted that doesn't have very good fuel distribution. And I learned all your tricks, Mike, including backing that throttle off just a touch so that butterfly's cocked in there a little bit and kind of roughs up that air for better fuel distribution. And I teach that wholeheartedly now, and I think that's good advice. So firewalling the airplane is firewalling and then just back a hair, because you get a little peak of RPM power, manifold pressure RPM, by getting that butterfly valve kind of at an angle there and mixing up that air. But so my question is what's the best advice to give these guys? My IFR student was telling me that, well, the owner of the airplane wants it ran this way. And I said, well, we need to run it the way the owner wants it. But I think that's not really good. I think we're running it too rich. And it definitely smoothed up. I think at altitude, even on the carbureted 0470s, I think your advice on getting it rough and then just smoothing it up. And I saw your show just a while back that even running at Lena Peak, you might get a little stumble once in a while and not be concerned about that at altitude. And I was glad to hear that, because flying over the mountains and getting that little stumble, I thought I didn't like that. And I actually thought, man, do I really want to be running Lena Peak? And when I heard it on your show here, that's not really a concern, it made me feel a lot better. So what's your guys' take on that? I'm just want to make sure that I'm leading my students in the right direction on this. Lena Peak, Richa Peak, staying out of the red box, all that business.
I'm not sure I'm being accurately quoted as far as that stumbles are okay. I don't think I ever said that. But what I probably said, which somehow got mangled, was that running Lena Peak is always a little bit rougher than running Richa Peak because of cycle to cycle variation, which increases the leaner the mixture is. But let me ask a quick question. The airplane that you were flying with the student, the rental airplane, I guess, what kind of instrumentation did it have? Did it have an engine monitor? What were you looking at?
He did have an engine monitor. It was one of the old schools. I can't remember if it was, I think it was a JPI.
Okay. But you could see CHEs and EGTs on each of the cylinders.
Yes.
Okay. So the red box that we can use as pilots, as opposed to the theoretical red box that you might use in a test cell, we have to operate the engines based on the data that we have available. So pretty much the best we can do is to define the red box by CHT. And my general rule for continentals is we don't want the CHTs to be above 400 degrees. I mean, there's nothing super magic about that number. It could be 405 or it could be 395, but we really don't want to see a 4 at the front of the cylinder head temperature. So as long as we're not seeing 4s, you're not in the red box. It's just keep it that simple. And I pretty well guarantee in 182, if you're up above 8,000 feet, you're not going to see any 4s. You know, your biggest concern is, are you seeing 2s? Because it's pretty well cooled engine. So you know, I think either the owner of the airplane's advice is being misconstrued, or it's not very good advice. And you know, it certainly is a struggle. It's a rental airplane. You kind of don't want to do something different than what the owner of the airplane asks you to do. But on the other hand, you know, as pilot in command, you're sort of obligated to keep the engine happy, and it was clearly unhappy. So I think clearly you were doing the right thing. And in a 182, anytime you're at cruise power or less, leaning to the onset of roughness and richening just barely enough for the roughness to go away is a good procedure. In the 182, because the mixture distribution is not very good, you know, you're very likely to have a couple of cylinders slightly rich at peak and a couple of cylinders slightly lean at peak when you do that. But as long as the cylinder head temperatures are okay, it's all right.
With the CHTs, Mike, one thing that worries me is detonation when it happens is a very rapid increase. And so you might start below 400, but if you were in the red box and in a danger area, a moment of inattention, and next thing you know, it's like accelerating through 420.
Right. And that's why I always think it's super important for an engine monitor to have programmable alarms that go off and alert you if a cylinder head temperature starts to run away. And unfortunately, a lot of the engine monitors that are certified for primary replacement don't give you the option of setting the alarms. And I think that's a very serious loss, because I think that's one of the most important functions of an engine monitor is to provide alarms when something abnormal occurs. Because as you say, if you get into detonation, or even worse, if you get into pre-ignition, which is a thing that happens very super rapidly, you know, you typically will have a minute or so to save the engine before things start to melt.
Yeah, and if you're IFR, you're busy, and
and nobody's staring at that thing. You're focused on the flight instruments.
And so, you know, the owner of the airplane is a friend of mine. He's a CFI, and I had a chat with him when I got back, and he was fine with what I had told him to do. Yeah. So it's not like we're flying the airplane inconsistent with what he wants. He understood totally. I said it just was running too rich up there.
Well, something else that people don't really put their heads around is that the red box gets smaller as the power output goes down.
Yeah.
And in a normally aspirated engine,
feet, there is
the higher you go, the smaller the power output. So at 8,000 feet, the red box doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And so leaning to 100 degrees rich at peak, so you can fly it at peak. My airplane, and I'm running a 550. If I'm at 8,000 feet, if I'm at 40 degrees lean at peak, which I don't think in terms of degrees from peak, but I go mostly by fuel flow. But if I'm that lean, I'm not ever going to get there. So I tend to run at peak, or you know, if I want to if I'm at 11,000 feet, I will often lean with the airspeed, and I will tweak it around. I've kind of find out where the airplane goes fastest.
That's interesting.
I'm only developing like 60% power. There's no red box, and I'm just going to get the best power, best efficiency, whatever I want to do. So yeah, as you climb, you can still do 100 degrees Richa Peak, but that target is going to move a little bit for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I
See,
love flying around.
that's the difference between Paul and me, because Paul wants to get there fast. I'm flying this twin that's
Yeah.
sucking 30 gallons an
Mike
hour,
is
and I'm leaning from the nautical miles per gallon readout
Yeah.
on my
Yeah.
totalizer to try to get that number as low as I can.
But you know, we're all about numbers on this show. We love promoting engine monitors and boxes, and we're all kind of analytic types. But when I go flying with my husband, I have it all analytically leaned out, and then he says it sounds a little rough, and he goes and he
Yeah.
starts messing.
Yeah.
And he's right; it does sound better. So there
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
something to be said for
Oh, absolutely.
using your butt to fly and feeling, you know, looking at the performance of the aircraft, just like you did. That's
Engines
great.
talk. They're very good at talking.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
have to
fly
listen to them.
with the onset of fancy headsets.
Mm-hmm.
I find that I don't hear things as well, and I didn't realize it, but I started flying with my shoes off. And I got, not because of the smell, but I got called out for it one time a few years ago. Yeah. And I found that you can feel it, especially on a metal airplane. I don't feel it so much in the Cirrus, but on a 210, you can feel that the muffler is right there near your feet, and you can feel those pulses. And when it misses, I feel it in my feet.
Yep, I do too. And the Cardinal,
Yep.
I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
It's an interesting thing.
So
But you got
your
to kick those shoes
intuition
off.
is right, Doug. Don't fly with your shoes off in Idaho, though. That sounds really cold.
No, that's not good.
I totally agree with
And-
Paul.
and-
I actually feel the airplane
Yeah.
when it's not happy.
Yeah.
And don't lean so much that it stumbles.
No.
Well,
Keep it
stumble
smooth.
might have been a bad word, Mike, because it's just kind of a hesitation. And you know, when you're over in the middle of the mountains and in the wintertime and a
Well,
single
don't
engine
do that.
airplane, your
Yeah.
mind starts playing games on you. And I go, I just want things to sound really natural continuously.
Yeah. I had a Comanche that was solar powered.
What?
Well, I know, because when the sun went down, it started running terrible. And so I quit flying at night. Every
a
time,
keeper.
all kinds of weird noises and vibrations would start happening. So I decided I wasn't going to fly it at night anymore.
That's great, Paul. On that note,
Yeah, on that
thank you. Thank you for the great question, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Well, hey,
Yeah.
you guys answered it totally, and I was really happy to hear what you had to say.
Yeah, you're doing
Thanks
God's
for the
work
call,
up there.
Doug.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that's it for this episode. Hopefully we got a few things right this time. Let us know and keep sending us your tricky questions. You can email them to podcasts@aopa.org.
See you next time.
Bye-bye, everybody.